In September of 2013, Target was certified compliant with the payment card industry's security standard. It ran firewalls, intrusion detection, and malware detection software, built for exactly this kind of threat. Weeks later, some 40 million payment cards were stolen from its registers. Target did not discover the breach itself. The Justice Department had to call and tell them. A United States Senate committee set out to answer one question: how did the attackers get past all of it? The truth leaves a paper trail. Let's follow it. Findings of fact. In November and December of 2013, criminals breached the computer network of Target, one of the largest retailers in the United States, exposing some 40 million payment cards and personal records of as many as 70 million customers. It remains a defining case study in how corporate security fails. A Senate committee traced the attack using a framework called the kill chain, and this episode follows its report link by link, from a contractor's stolen password, to the alarms that rang and went unanswered, to what the failure cost, the notification. Target did not discover this breach on its own. On the evening of December the 12th, 2013, the company was contacted by the Department of Justice, which had noticed suspicious activity involving payment cards that had been used at Target stores. That account does not come from a leak or a rumor. It comes from the sworn testimony of John Mulligan, Target's chief financial officer, delivered before the Senate Judiciary Committee in February of 2014. Where this episode relies on Target's own version of events, it is that testimony we are drawing on. According to Mulligan, the company acted quickly once it was told. The next day, it met with the Justice Department and the Secret Service. The day after that, it hired an outside team of forensic experts. And on December the 15th, Target confirmed the worst. Criminals had gotten into its systems, had installed malware on its point-of-sale network, and had potentially stolen customer payment data. That same day, the company removed the malware from virtually all of its registers in the United States. 4 days later, on December the 19th, Target told the public. Approximately 40 million credit and debit card accounts had been exposed for cards used in its US stores over roughly the previous 3 weeks. The story had in fact broken the day before, not from Target, but from an independent security reporter named Brian Krebs, who would go on to report much of what the public first learned about the attack. Then, in January, the number grew. Target disclosed that a second set of data, names, mailing addresses, phone numbers, and email addresses, belonging to as many as 70 million customers, had also been taken. The company said it believed the same attacker was responsible for both, though its investigation was still ongoing when it said so. Those are the facts the company itself confirmed: the dates, the 2 sets of data, the scale. What they do not explain is the harder question: how did anyone get in? And once inside, why did nothing stop them? To answer that, the Senate committee reached for a framework that did not come from retail or from banking, but from the military, the kill chain. In March of 2014, the majority staff of the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science and Transportation published its analysis of the breach. It is a short document, and it is honest about its own limits. The committee did not have Target's completed forensic report. That work was still underway. What it had was the public record, contemporaneous reporting, technical analyses by outside security firms, and Target's own testimony to Congress. So the report is careful, almost to a fault, about saying what was known and what was not. It uses words like appears to and reportedly, and while unconfirmed. We are going to keep those words. Where the committee hedged, we hedge, because the hedging is part of the finding. To organize what was known, the committee borrowed a tool called the intrusion kill chain. It was introduced in 2011 by a team of researchers at Lockheed Martin, and it was designed to change how defenders think. The old model of computer security, the researchers argued, was mostly static. Build a wall, install some alarms, and wait. That model assumed the attacker always had the advantage. The kill chain proposed something different. Study the attacker's process as a sequence of steps, and you can find a place to break it. There are 7 steps. Reconnaissance, the attacker quietly studies the target. Weaponization, they build the malicious payload. Delivery, they get it to the victim, often by email. Exploitation, the code is triggered. Installation, the attacker establishes a lasting foothold. Command and control, they open a line to steer the attack from outside. And finally, actions on objectives, the theft or destruction itself. Here is why the framework matters, and it is the single most important idea in this story. To succeed, the attacker has to complete every one of those 7 steps. The defender only has to break one. A single link, cut in time, stops the entire chain. Reconnaissance means nothing if delivery fails. A perfect foothold means nothing if the data can never be sent out. The committee's analysis suggested that Target had a number of opportunities along the kill chain to stop the attackers, and, one after another, missed them. What follows is a walk down that chain, link by link, using the report as our guide. We begin where the attackers began, outside Target entirely, the contractor. The first link in the chain was not inside Target at all. According to the committee, the attackers reportedly first gained access to Target by stealing the network credentials of a company called Fazio Mechanical Services, a heating, refrigeration and air conditioning contractor based in the small borough of Sharpsburg, Pennsylvania. Fazio was not a technology firm. It was a mechanical contractor that specialized in refrigeration work for supermarkets in the Mid-Atlantic region. Why would a refrigeration contractor have keys to a national retailer's network? Because it had legitimate business there. Fazio had been granted remote access to Target's systems, not to control heating or cooling, the company later stressed, but for ordinary back-office tasks, electronic billing, submitting contracts, and managing projects. This is not unusual. Large retailers work with hundreds of outside vendors, and it is common to give those vendors a way to log in and do their jobs. The convenience is real, so is the risk. Every credential handed to an outsider is another door, and every door is only as strong as the person holding the key. The committee reported that Fazio's credentials were stolen at least 2 months before the Target breach began, through an email carrying malware, a phishing attack aimed at the contractor. Phishing is the oldest trick in the book, an email crafted to look legitimate, carrying a malicious attachment or link. When it is tailored to a specific person or company, it is called spear phishing. Some of the reporting named a specific password-stealing program that may have been used. A strain descended from a well-known banking Trojan. The committee noted, carefully, that this could not be confirmed. We note it the same way. There is a dispute in the record about how well Fazio was defended, and it deserves to be stated fairly, because Fazio was itself the victim of a crime. Investigators cited in the reporting said that Fazio used the free version of a consumer anti-malware product for its malware protection, a tool that does not provide continuous, real-time protection and whose license is meant for individual home users, not corporate networks. Fazio, for its part, issued a public statement of its own. It said its information technology systems and security measures were, in its words, in full compliance with industry practices. It said it did not perform remote monitoring of Target's heating and cooling systems, and it described itself, plainly, as a fellow victim of a sophisticated cyber attack. Both accounts are part of the public record. We present them side by side and let the disagreement stand, because the committee did not resolve it either. What matters for the chain is simpler than the dispute. A single set of credentials, issued for the mundane work of billing, had quietly become a door into a much larger building. The attackers were about to find out just how much that door could reach. The flat network. A stolen vendor credential gets an attacker onto the edge of a network. It does not, by itself, get them to the cash registers. Those should be two very different places, and the distance between them should be the hardest ground in the whole system to cross. Consider what the credential was actually for. A former Target security team member, quoted in the reporting the committee relied on, said that a vendor like Fazio would most likely have logged in through an external billing system, named in the reporting as a platform called Ariba, along with related portals for contracts and project work. These are the digital equivalent of a loading dock and a back office. They are where an outside contractor belongs. The point of sale network, the registers, and the servers that feed them is the vault. A contractor has no business there at all. The wall between the loading dock and the vault has a name: network segmentation. It means dividing a network into zones of different trust, so that a breach in a low trust area, the vendor portal, cannot simply flow into a high trust one, the registers. If the zones are properly separated, a stolen billing password is a contained problem. If they are not, it can become a total one. There was also supposed to be a second barrier at the door itself. The payment card industry's security standard, which Target was certified against, calls for what is known as two-factor authentication for remote access to payment networks. A second proof of identity beyond a password, so that a stolen password alone is not enough to get in. According to a former Target vendor manager cited by the committee, Target rarely required that second factor from its lower-level contractors. A password, on its own, opened the door. Now, here the committee was scrupulous about the limits of what could be proven, and so are we. It stated plainly that the public record did not establish exactly how the attackers crossed from that outer vendor system to the point-of-sale terminals. There was a theory in circulation that the intruders exploited a default account in a piece of IT management software to move deeper into the network. But the committee presented it as a possibility, not a finding. Nobody in the public record at the time could draw the full map of the intruder's path. What the committee concluded did not depend on drawing that map, and it wrote its conclusion with care. The attackers, it said, appear to have successfully moved from less sensitive areas of Target's network into the areas storing consumer data. And that movement suggested that Target had failed to properly isolate its most sensitive network assets. You do not need to know every turn a burglar took through a building to conclude that the interior doors were unlocked. In plain terms, the walls that should have contained the intruder were not high enough, and the door that should have demanded a second key demanded only one. Once inside, the attackers could reach the registers, and when they got there, they deployed something built for a very particular and very brief opportunity: the skimmer in memory. To understand what the malware did, you have to understand a single, narrow moment inside a cash register. A moment that lasts a small fraction of a second, and that most people have never had reason to think about. When you swipe a card, the data from its magnetic stripe enters the register's working memory. The register needs that data in readable form for just long enough to process it. Then, in a well-built system, it encrypts the data and sends it on to the payment processor. Encryption is the lock. It protects the card data while it sits in storage and while it travels across the network. But there is one moment it cannot protect: the instant between the swipe and the encryption, when the data is sitting in memory as plain, readable text. It has to be readable then, because the machine has to work with it. That is the gap. The malware installed on Target's registers was built to live inside that gap. It is called a RAM scraper. RAM is the register's working memory, the temporary space where data sits while the machine is using it. The scraper did exactly what the name suggests. It continuously read the register's memory, watched for the unencrypted card data in its brief window of exposure, scraped it out, and stored it. The encryption was never broken. It did not have to be. The malware simply took the data a half step before the lock closed. According to the committee, this was a tailored version of a piece of malware that was for sale on criminal forums for somewhere between roughly $1,800 and $2,300, which raises a genuine question the report does not settle. Was this a sophisticated attack or a crude one? A director at the security firm McAfee called the malware absolutely unsophisticated and uninteresting. A senior official at the Department of Homeland Security described the malware used in the attack as incredibly sophisticated. Both assessments appear unreconciled in the Senate report. The tension is real, but the two views can be read together, and the reading teaches something. The tool was cheap and ordinary, an off-the-shelf skimmer for the digital age. But the operation around the tool was not. Getting the credential, crossing into the vault, pushing the malware onto the majority of Target's point-of-sale system, gathering the loot, and carrying it back out without being stopped. That was patient, coordinated work. A cheap crowbar in the hands of a careful crew. Whatever label you prefer, the effect was the same, and it was invisible to the people it happened to. As shoppers moved through the checkout lanes in the days around Thanksgiving, the registers were quietly copying their cards, and then the stolen data had to get out, which, it turns out, is where Target had its clearest chance to stop everything, the alarms that rang. Here is the part of the story that gives the whole report its weight, and it is the part that is hardest to hear. Target's defenses were not blind. They saw the attack happening. The alarms went off, and the story is not that the alarms failed. It is what happened after they rang. Target had invested in serious security. In his testimony, Mulligan described multiple layers of protection: firewalls, malware detection, intrusion detection and prevention, data loss prevention tools. Among them was a malware detection system from a company called FireEye, which Target had deployed to watch for exactly this kind of intrusion. This was not a company that had skipped the basics. According to the reporting the committee cited, the system did its job. When the attackers installed their data-stealing software on Target's servers, first on November the 30th and again on the 2nd of December, the FireEye system triggered urgent alerts each time. More than that, the software could have been configured to delete the detected malware automatically, on its own, without waiting for a human to decide. According to that same reporting, Target's security team did neither. It did not act on the alarms, and it had not enabled the automatic deletion. Separately, a second product, from the vendor Symantec, flagged malicious behavior on the same server around the same time. Two different systems, pointing at the same threat, at the same place. So why would a trained security team not respond to an urgent alert? It is tempting to imagine negligence, but the committee offered a more human and more useful explanation. The FireEye alert, according to the reporting, arrived with a generic-sounding label, something to the effect of malware.binary. A large security operation can generate an enormous volume of alerts every day, and many of them are false positives. Noise. When a system cries wolf often enough, a real alert can look like one more piece of noise in an overflowing queue. The committee did not offer this to excuse the failure. It offered it to explain how a warning can be fully present, correctly generated, sitting right there on a screen, and still be missed. That is the quiet horror of this chapter. The defense worked. The response did not. And these were not the only warnings. The committee noted that this general category of memory scraping malware was not new. The FBI had observed it in attacks since 2011. It noted that Visa had issued warnings in 2013, specifically about the use of these attacks against retailers, reportedly with recommendations for reducing the risk. The threat was known to the industry. The alarms were ringing at two levels at once: the industry's and Target's own. Meanwhile, the stolen data was leaving the building. It was gathered onto internal servers and then pushed out, roughly 11 gigabytes of it, according to the analysis, to outside servers, at least one of which was located in Russia, sent in plain, unencrypted text. And there is a detail here that shows just how deliberate the operation was. The transfers were timed. According to the technical analysis, the data moved during business hours, between mid-morning and early evening, apparently so that the traffic would blend into the ordinary rhythm of Target's busy network, rather than stand out as a strange overnight spike. The attackers were hiding in plain sight, in the daylight, and with that, the chain had run all the way to its final link. Every one of the 7 steps had been completed, what it cost, and what it changed. The accounting came later, and it is a matter of public record, not estimate, but the company's own disclosures. In its annual filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission, Target reported that through the end of its 2016 fiscal year, the breach had cost the company $292 million in cumulative expenses. Insurance recovered about $90 million of that, leaving a net cost of roughly $202 million. That figure is a floor, not a ceiling. It captures what had been booked by then, and more was still to come. The legal reckoning arrived in tracks because different groups had been harmed in different ways. Consumers, financial institutions, and Target's own shareholders all sued, and the federal cases were gathered into a single consolidated proceeding in a court in Minnesota. The consumers, a class the court estimated at nearly 100 million people, reached a settlement built around a $10 million fund, from which an individual with documented losses could claim up to $10,000. The banks and credit unions, who had borne the cost of reissuing millions of compromised cards, pursued their own track and settled for tens of millions of dollars in more than one agreement. And then there was the government. In May of 2017, Target agreed to pay $18.5 million to resolve an investigation by the attorneys general of 47 states and the District of Columbia. At the time, it was described as the largest multi-state data breach settlement that had ever been reached. And that settlement is worth dwelling on, because it is where the lesson becomes explicit. It did not only ask for money, it required Target to do specific things going forward, to develop and maintain a comprehensive information security program, to employ an executive whose job was to run that program and answer for it, to bring in an independent expert to assess its security and to encrypt or otherwise devalue the card data it held, so that stolen data would be useless. Read that list again against the story we have just told. A security program with clear ownership, independent assessment, data rendered useless if stolen. The settlement was, in effect, a point-by-point answer to the failures the Senate report had traced along the chain. There were consequences inside the company too. Its chief information officer departed in the spring of 2014, and in May of that year, its chief executive stepped down from his roles and resigned from the board. A retail data breach had reached all the way to the top of one of the largest retailers in the country, but the enduring value of the Senate committee's analysis is not the size of the loss or the identity of who lost their job. It is the shape of the failure, 7 links in a chain, and a defender who needed to break only one. A vendor's stolen password, a door that asked for only one key, a flat network that let an intruder walk from the loading dock to the vault, an unencrypted moment inside a cash register, and an alarm that rang, correctly, into a room where it was mistaken for noise. Each of those was a place the chain could have been broken. Not one of them required predicting the future. Each only required following through on a control that was already understood, and in several cases already required. That is the report's quiet argument, and it is why the incident still matters more than a decade on. Security is not a single wall, it is a series of them, and the strength of the whole depends on the weakest one, which may not even be inside your own building. The responsibility to maintain each wall cannot be handed off to a contractor or delegated to a piece of software and then left unwatched. An investigation like this one does not exist to assign blame. It exists so that the next organization reading it can find the link it has left unbroken before someone else does. This has been Findings of Fact. Thanks for watching. Every source is linked in the description if you want to dig deeper. If we got anything wrong, let us know in the comments. We'll pin the correction. And subscribe so the next investigation finds you. Or keep watching. The next one's on screen now.